Good morning. Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. Happy Rosh Chodesh Nissan. Today is the first day of the Jewish month of Nissan. Today is the anniversary of the start of our Jewish calendar. Every year in my first class of the semester, teaching Talmudic law at McGill Faculty of Law, I make the following points, and I return to these and emphasize them using different examples throughout the semester. So, Talmudic law, Jewish law, is a comprehensive legal system, and it claims to have a seamless integration of law, justice, theology, ethics, philosophy, social policy, every area of life. That's the claim that Jewish law makes. Now, you can question that claim and you can argue with that claim, but that's the claim that Jewish law makes, that there can, by definition, be no contradiction between law and philosophy, between theology and social policy, etc., etc. And our legal system has been a source of pride for the Jewish people from the beginning of our history over 3,500 years ago until today. Professor Chaim Seiman is a professor of law at Vanderbilt University. He is also a highly recognized Talmudic scholar. He is a member of the Bet Din of America. And he wrote, "Law is the vehicle through which every category of Jewish wisdom is delivered." And that's the underlying thesis of my course. And that's what I want to share with you this morning with two just very brief examples, that law, Jewish law, is the best way to understand Judaism, better than mysticism or Hasidus or commentary or any other kind of approach that one would have. Law is Judaism's most fundamental organizing principle. In my opinion, law is the structure through which Judaism has had and continues to have the greatest impact on the world. And of course, a large part of that is to see within Jewish law, within Judaism, the definition of what is included in law is much larger than in any other society. So allow me to share with you just two very brief examples in connection with the Jewish calendar and with Rosh Chodesh. So, we've discussed this many times. The Jewish calendar follows a lunar calendar, the cycles of the moon. A year is made up of 12 lunar cycles, except for a leap year like this year, when there are 13. Islam also follows a lunar calendar, but the difference is Islam follows a pure lunar calendar. The lunar year is 11 days shorter than the solar year. So just to take an example, the first day of Ramadan each year is 11 days earlier than it was the day before. So the holiday of Ramadan actually travels around the entire cycle of the year. Right now, it's in the late winter, early spring. Next year, it'll be in the winter. A few years from now, it'll be in the fall. It goes all the way around the calendar. The difference that we have is that the Torah says that Passover, has to be b'chodesh ha'aviv, in the month of spring. Passover must be in the springtime. Now, we have a calendar that we follow. It was originally established about 1,500 years ago, near the end of the Talmudic era. And it's a set calendar. All the dates are known in advance. It follows basically a 19-year cycle. And basically, every 19 years, the cycle repeats itself. So we know the calendar in advance. If you want to know what day is the first day of Pesach in 20 years, I have a book right here. I can look it up and I can tell you. However, that was done at the end of the Talmudic era when the rabbis saw that the exile is spreading and lasting a long time, and there would be no other way for Jews to know when the Jewish holidays are. Before that time, during the time that the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was standing in Jerusalem, there was a completely different system. And the years and the months were determined by the Sanhedrin Hagadol, the great Sanhedrin, that was the highest court of the Jewish people of 70 judges. Now, you should be able to see that if the lunar year is 11 days shorter than the solar year, then approximately every 3 years, if you want to keep Pesach in the spring, you got to push it back by about a month. And that's what happens in our calendar approximately, not exactly, but approximately every 3 years. We have a Jewish lunar year, which adds a second month of Adar. That's the month that just finished. So this current year has 13 months. Because we added that second month, Pesach is going to be April 22nd. If we would not have added that extra month, Pesach would have started March 22nd. So again, approximately every 3 years, we add a month to keep Pesach somewhere in April. This year to the end of April, next year the middle, third year at the beginning of April, and then we're going to push it back again another month. That's all worked out on our calendar in advance, and we know when those Jewish leap years are in advance. But during the time that the Beis HaMikdash was staying in Jerusalem, each year that was a decision that was made by the Sanhedrin Hagadol, the great Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. And they would decide based on natural phenomenon. As Pesach was approaching, a few months in advance, they would start to see what are the conditions. Because in Israel, and when we say the springtime, we mean in Israel. So in Israel, the winter is a rainy season. Of course, that when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, every single Jewish person traveled to Yerushalayim for Pesach. Well, in order for that to happen, the roads had to be clear. They had to no longer be muddy. So the judges would check, are the roads still muddy? If they're still muddy, that means the Pesach is too early. We have to push it off. They would look to see, have the trees started to blossom? How far along is the wheat crop that was planted in the fall before the winter? They would look at all of these natural phenomenon to decide if this year Pesach would turn out to be so early as it would be in late winter, and did it need to be pushed back? Yes, of course, the result was approximately every 3 years they'd be adding an extra month of Adar, but they evaluated it every year based on the conditions of that year, and they determined before Rosh Chodesh Nissan, they determined whether there had to be an extra month of Adar. What's fascinating about that, from the point of view that I want to share this morning, is that this was done by the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. It was not done by the Kohanim. It was not done by the rabbis of the Talmud. It was not done by the clergy, even though the main consequence related to religious life, when to observe the holidays. And yet, very importantly, this was a legal matter that was determined by the highest legal court, the head of the judicial system. So what you see from this is that Jewish law is much wider than other legal systems. Here we have a subject that's really not legal at all, And yet it is overseen by the judicial system because it is a very important aspect of the life of every single Jew in the world, and that belongs in court. That belongs decided by judges. Number 2. So today also we have this calendar that tells us when Rosh Chodesh is. Today is Rosh Chodesh Nissan, the first day of the month of Nissan. And we have this calendar. We know in advance. I can tell you by looking at my resource book over here, I can tell you what day Rosh Chodesh Nissan is in 20 years, 30 years from now, whatever you want to know. It's all written out. But in former times, when the Beit HaMikdash was standing in Jerusalem, the new month, Rosh Chodesh, was determined only on the basis of eyewitness testimony. And it was overseen by the Sanhedrin Hagadol, the great Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. So what would happen is people at night would see the moon in its new phase. They would come to the Sanhedrin Hagadol, the great Sanhedrin, and they would testify. And the judges would cross-examine them because the judges were experts in astronomy and they knew in advance what the moon was supposed to look like. Where was it in the sky? Which way was it pointing? How did it look? So they were able to cross-examine the witnesses, and once they accepted the witnesses as true, then the Sanhedrin would proclaim, today is Rosh Chodesh. Today is sanctified as Rosh Chodesh. So our calendar, and we've discussed this before, our calendar was not decided by the astronomic reality. The astronomic reality was used to inform the witnesses who testified before the judges, and it was the proclamation of the judges that made it Rosh Chodesh. Okay. Well, that means that every month you have to make sure that you have witnesses come. And you couldn't take a chance with it. Because if somehow, for some reason, you did not have 2 kosher witnesses to come one month, the entire Jewish people would be in trouble. What would they do? The whole system of our calendar depends on having those witnesses. And you know, when something happens on a regular basis, yes, maybe the first time it's an experience, but the 100th time, the 1,000th time, everybody thinks, well, I'm sure somebody else will go. I'm sure somebody else will go. The Talmud says a pot that is owned by multiple partners is neither hot nor cold. Meaning, if there are multiple people that are supposed to look after something, everyone thinks, oh, the other guy's doing it, the other person's doing it, and it ends up not getting done. And there was a great danger to that. So the rabbis initiated a series of procedures to ensure that that never, ever happened. Number one, they said that certain laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov would be set aside in order to travel. So you didn't have to be, if it was on Friday night or Yom Tov night, you were not limited only to those people that lived within walking distance of the court, because it was possible to travel. You see how important this is. This becomes, for example, like a medical emergency where the laws of Shabbos, some of the laws of Shabbos are set aside. Here too, this is such an important need that some of the laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov are set aside. So now you had a larger pool to gather from. Also, the members of the court had a surefire way of attracting a large number of people to come. They served a big, delicious, free meal. Could be this is the start of attracting people to come to shul by offering a very nice kiddush after davening. It was a delicious meal. Okay, so lots of people came. Lots of people would come. It could be every month, it could be a couple of hundred people would come. And here's the most important. The Sanhedrin, and remember, these are the 70 greatest judges of the highest court of Israel. And the Sanhedrin cross-examined every single witness that came, no matter how many there were. Now, yes, it is true that for the first few witnesses, the cross-examination was extensive to make sure that they were valid witnesses, and they now had 2 eyewitnesses that fit all the requirements. After that, the cross-examination was a little bit more quick, but there was still a cross-examination. Every person who came stood before the Sanhedrin, the greatest judges in the land, and they testified before them. So who would come? Who are these people that would show up every month? Remember, it's every single month. And remember, you know others are going to come anyway. Who is it who would be motivated to come? Well, who is available to come in the middle of the day and to take off hours and hours? Presumably somebody that did not have a job. Most of the people who came were poor, and they were out of work, and they were attracted, at least partially, by a delicious free meal. In other words, this system was intended to attract those on the margins of society, those within society who are most vulnerable. And here's the point. Every single person that came was treated with dignity. The Sanhedrin Hagadol, the great Sanhedrin, had nothing better to do for hours and hours than listen to every single one of these witnesses. Because if you just listened to the first few witnesses and then you told the rest, oh, just go home, we don't need you, no one's going to show up the next time. So every single one of these people who came testified in front of the Sanhedrin Hagadol, was interviewed by them, and every single person who came understood that the entire Jewish people were able to observe all the Jewish holidays because of me, because I showed up, because I testified. I am needed. I am significant. This system, this eyewitness testimony, had several goals. But one of them, and again remember, this was not done by the Kohanim, the priests. This was not done by the rabbis. This was not a clerical or clergy subject. This was a legal proceeding. It was a court case overseen by judges, requiring witnesses, cross-examination. It was a court case. This is the legal system. And one of the goals was to use the judicial system to give dignity and self-esteem to those who are marginalized in society. And I don't know of another legal system that uses its judiciary in such a way for such a socially healing system. Many legal systems will say this, that every person has self-worth, that every person is entitled to dignity. But I don't know of another legal system that practices it. The way in which the judges of the highest court allocate their time to make it clear to those who are most vulnerable in society, who are on the margins of society, that you are necessary, you're needed, you're significant. The entire Jewish people is relying on your testimony. And that is the system that was brought into practice on this date, in the year that the Jewish people were just getting ready to leave Egypt, with the words that we read this past Shabbos in the shul, HaChodesh Hazeh Lechem Rosh Chodashim. This month, the month of Nissan, should be for you the beginning of the months and the beginning of the institution of our Jewish calendar. And it is with this that our season of redemption begins. My friends, I wish you all a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.